Hi, in this movie I want to talk about variables. Variables in ActionScript and any programming language are basically containers. They can contain a certain kind of information, and that information can be swapped in and out over time. So what's great about a variable is it allows variability. So in the movie previously where I was talking about trace and operator precedence, right at the end I introduced this variable which I had named hello, and it's a string type, and then I defined it as I defined the string, and then I traced it so that we could see it show up. So let's run this again and we'll see it pop up, and here it is in the output section. Notice nothing appears in the window itself because we don't have any interface items, but over in the output area I have the result, which is that variable. So if we come back to actions here, again the thing that was printed wasn't the string, it was the variable, and when we told it to trace, we told it to trace the contents of that variable. Trace, that command, and variables go hand in hand. Many times you'll use a trace when you're not sure what the variable contents will be. You'll put in a trace to check your work as you're going, and it's a great way to discover if a variable is what you thought it would be. But in this initial discussion, just the thing you need to know is when you declare a variable, you have to declare a variable before you use it. There's going to be on the declaration line, you'll see this little word var, and notice that it's all blue. That's something that Flash understands. So we're telling Flash, hey, we're going to make a new variable here, and the variable we're making, that's the name, and then following the name is a colon, and then we tell it the type of variable that it's going to be. In this case, we're telling it it's going to be a string. So this typing is what's important in Flash. And actually in older versions of Flash, you didn't have to tell a variable what type it could be. And it would cause all kinds of problems because you might have thought you were dealing with a number, and then you treat it accidentally like a string and you get some problems. So let's take that to the next step. I have another file here, and in this variable I define my num, and it's a number, and I initially give it a value of 1. And then what I do is I say, okay, now my num equals this. And by the way, whenever you're doing these equal things, the item on the left equals whatever's on the right. So I'm trying to change my num here into a string, and you're going to see a problem when I run this. Notice we get an error, and it says, hey, you're trying to change one thing into another thing. Flash doesn't want you to be able to do that, and that's good. It would be confusing if you could convert numbers into strings, and I'll show you how to do that so that you can deal with them like strings. But it would be a bad thing if you could accidentally convert a number into a string or a string into a number type variable. So when you type something, you're telling Flash ahead of time, this is the kind of variable I want this to be. Okay, so let's come over here. I'm going to show you one more. Actually, I'm going to open, let me see, I think I have a dynamic text box here. Let me see if I've got a couple of these guys up. Yeah. And this one, I just wanted to show you how you could use a text box on stage to show what a variable is. So in this case, again, I define a variable. It's defined as a number, and I give it a setting. And then I've put a dynamic text box on the stage. And notice that it's typed dynamic text, and I've named it my text. Dynamic text boxes are great ways to have ActionScript show things. So if you wanted to display information, you could load external text files. If you had a score in a game and you needed to update the score, you could put it in a dynamic text box. So it's a great way of showing variables. In some ways, it's kind of like using trace, except now instead of seeing the information in an output window, you actually see it on the stage. So this would be something where you wanted the viewer to see the variable results rather than just you. So anyway, I've made this dynamic text box called my text, and if we come over into actions, I need to go to frame 1. Notice that I tell my text dot text. So a property of a dynamic text box is this thing called dot text, and we tell it to equal, and we put in a string, and then we put in plus my num. So when you're referring to a variable and it's going to be in a text field, you would attach some string to it and then add the variable. So I'm going to go ahead and test that movie. And it tells us the string that I had put in ActionScript. See, here's the ActionScript. My variable, well, the text is my variable is space, that's string, plus my num. My num was defined as 12, so it shows up here. So this is a way of displaying variable contents on the stage if you're wanting them to give user feedback for whatever reason. Now I took this a step further, and I have a loop here. It's kind of a loop. It's actually using a timer. I'll do another one on loops down the road here, but for right now I'm introducing a timer, and I want the timer to give a little bit of a pause so that when we do this countdown, we can, or actually count up, we can actually see it take place. So a timer is kind of weird, and you might have seen timers before, but let me walk through the code again. We have first a variable called my num, and I define it as being 1 to begin with. And then I make another variable called a timer, so you can have timer variables too. And for complex variables, a lot of times what you'll do is, instead of just giving them a property, you'll say equals a new whatever that is. Now in this case, we're making it a new timer. And there's two things that are involved here. The first number, the first parameter, is the amount of time that's going to go by. Now this is in milliseconds. So if you wanted 1 second, you would represent this by 1,000. And then the second one, in the second number in a timer, is the number of repeats that are going to occur. Okay, so we've defined a new timer, and we tell it here, okay, I want you to count up to 1,000 milliseconds. So I want you to count a second, and I want you to repeat this thing 100 times. And then the weird thing about a timer variable is you have to add an event listener to it. So it's going to sit around and say, what am I going to do? So what it does is it waits around for a timer to start. So timer event dot timer, and then you, just like other event listeners, you tell it what to do, and that's going to go do this function. So we have this whole thing set up. It says, okay, I'm going to wait around until I get a timer event, and then when I do that, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to handle timer. So we've defined it, we add a listener, then the next thing we have to do is tell it when to start. Now this could be anywhere in your code. You might execute this at different points, but essentially the thing I want you to think about is when you tell it to start, this amount of time is going to elapse, and then it's going to do this thing. So it's when I start it, it comes up and says, okay, I have to wait 1 second, and then after 1 second, here's the event, I'm going to go do this function. So it runs down here and it says, okay, I'm going to update my text.text with this information. So this is similar to the previous one you saw, where we say my text is blah blah blah, but now we've got it in a timer. So it's going to update this, and then it's going to count down. Oh, I should add one more thing. It's going to update the text box. And then we do something here. We increment the variable. So notice the variable starts here at 1. So then what it's going to do is it's going to increment the variable up to 2. So we add 1 to it. This would be the same as doing my num equals my num plus 1. Now when we execute this, then the timer is going to start over again because we're going to tell it to repeat 100 times. So let's watch it in action. It's a lot of times easier to see it in action. So I'm just going to go under commands. I'm sorry, not commands, control, test movie. And you notice that after a second passes, it goes ahead and increments the number. Well, it first puts it in the text box, and then it increments the number. And it's going to do this 100 times because 100 is the parameter for the second part. So you could come up with a test, for example, if you wanted a test that counted in minutes or seconds or whatever, you could have it do that. Now we could also do it the other way. If I define this as being my number at 100, I can also decrement the variable. Let me put in minuses instead of pluses. So you have to put in 2, and we'll start this. And now it starts at 100, and then it counts down instead. So it's the same kind of thing. So let's say you wanted to have time run out on somebody, you could put in a timer event and have that be part of your code. But the key thing I want you to get from this is the idea that, well, first you can have this cool dynamic text box. Again, it's just a box, a text box that I drew on the stage that I name my text. It's going to take any of the formatting that I set up for it, and then also remember that if you want it to be multiple lines, you need to set it to multiple line in the properties panel. And then the way it runs through is it's basically changing this variable, and as the variable is changing, it's being updated inside the box. So again, a variable, the power of a variable is it can contain different information in it. So in this case, we're either incrementing it or decrementing this variable. Last thing I wanted to show you in terms of variables. This is a random number generator. And I'll walk through it. This is a pretty thorough code. I'm going to go ahead and upload these 4 documents so that you can examine them. I guess I'm sorry, 5 documents so that you can examine them. I commented this code pretty thoroughly. So notice that I have a button, and it's called press_btn. And in the action script for it, we add the listener, there's a mouse click, and then here's the what to do when the mouse gets clicked. And what we do is we work with another variable. Now notice I declare this variable and I set it all in one step. So I just say var myRandom, it's going to be another number, and it's going to be equal to something that I'm getting on this side. RandRange is another function in here. And what you do is you pass RandRange 2 values, the low value of the range and the high value of the range. And what you get back is a number in between there. So it could be a number between 1 and 6. So if you wanted to do a dice program, you could have 2 variables, myRandom and myRandom2, and they could both execute RandRange between 1 and 6, and it could simulate a dice roll, for example. So you're probably like, well, how do you come up with that? Remember, that function's defined later, so don't worry about it. We just need to make sure that we give it the information that's correct, and then it'll set myRandom to a number between 1 and 6. Now, so we set that, and then we come across what's called a conditional statement. In this case, you've probably seen if statements, where it says, hey, if it's this, then execute this. Well, this is kind of like that. This is called a switch statement. And what you do is, again, notice that switch ends up being blue, and then in parentheses we tell it, what are we considering here? And we say we're considering, in this case, this variable called myRandom. And then again we put in braces, and the way that switch works is you deal with each case. So we say case 1. Now, normally you wouldn't have all this text here. I've put that in so you can understand what's going on. And again, just take a look at the file and you'll be able to read all of that. So in case 1, we set my text, the text in there, to say, hey diddle diddle. And then we break. The reason you put in break for switches is that you want to get out of it considering any other possibilities. So we want to just consider case 1. If it is the first case, we want to just do what's ever here and then jump out of that little condition. So you put in breaks after each one of these. Case 2, we're going to have it say this text instead, break. Case 3, it's going to do this one and break, so forth. Case 4 and 5 and 6. So we have a bunch of little strings here that my text becomes. And then we also have a default. Throwing in a default is a good safety measure for the switch condition. In case you don't cover all the cases, that's a funny statement, but if you don't cover all the cases, you want a default setting so that it doesn't sit here and you want to get some feedback and know that something is happening here. So in this case, I have the default saying, hey, something's not working. So I would get this default case in the event that I didn't get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. I hope that makes sense. So that's what the switch statement does. And let's come back here and notice that that's handle click. So that's what this function does. We have a random number, and then we do this little switch, and we walk through here, and we're basically evaluating which random number was generated. And then here's the random range or rand range thing. And to be honest with you, I just found this on the web. The thing I'm always familiar with is this statement or this random number generator. This is part of Flash's library, math.random. The problem with math.random is that it returns a number that's between 0 and 1 in a decimal value. So what I was always doing before I ran across rand range is I usually was doing a great big if-then thing because I was trying to come up with a number of conditions. So if it landed between 0 and 0.2, I would have Flash do one thing. If it landed between 0.21 and 0.4, I would have Flash do another thing. It was kind of a pain in the neck to walk through all that code. So instead, somebody smart online who likes math figured out that they could do some other math functions along with math random. Notice that they have it receive these two values. Remember the two parameters we send? Well, those parameters get turned into these variables that are defined inside rand range. So we send it 1 and 6 and it gets converted into min num and max num. And then we're able to do some math on min num and max num. So this is kind of like algebra. If you remember algebra, you would have x and I and n, and they all represented certain things. You would solve for x and you'd find out what was in x. Well, you were dealing with variables. So we're essentially coming up with a practical use for algebra here, where now we're saying, hey, we can receive any two numbers. We convert it into a variable. If we didn't have variables here, we wouldn't know what this calculation would have to be. You'd have to have a different calculation for all the different possibilities. So by having a variable, we can turn this into what's called an algorithm. We can come up with a recipe where we deal with any two numbers as long as we receive a minimum number and a maximum number. Then as long as we get that, we have this recipe for dealing with it. And if we have that recipe, we're always going to get a number between the min and the max. Now I suppose you could screw this up and send a min and max. I wonder if we sent 6 and 1 instead, we'd probably get something weird. In fact, let's run it first this way. We'll run it with it working. I'm just going to press Command Return. So now if I do press me, notice that it randomly is generating these different lines because it's coming up with a number between 1 and 6. Notice sometimes I'll click it 2 or 3 times and I get the same one over and over. If I wanted it to show the number as well, I could have it come in here and say here's my random. I could have it add my random to this. So I'll just do plus my random. And now it would actually show us these different cases. Now I'm not going to do it for all of them, but let's do it for the first three. And I press it. So see, there's the first random number showing up. So there's the second random number showing up. So you kind of see how these all integrate together. We have a text box that displays our information. We have a random number generator. Think about this. There's all kinds of potential. Let's say you wanted a website, and each time somebody came to your site, you wanted it to have one of 50 quotes. You could have a random range between 1 and 50, and you would define what each of those quotes would be. And then every time somebody hit the site and it loaded the file, it could have a different quote. Or you could have 50 pictures, and it could load a different picture for it. This is a great way of making your site seem more active and interesting, less static. So those are good things. Okay, so we do this random number generation, and then I was going to test to see what happens if we flipped it around the other way. If we do 6 and 1, let's see what happens. So it's still generating something. I don't know why it's generating it this way. I should have tested that before I did this movie, but it's still generating numbers. I thought it was going to go to the default, but it's obviously picking up a number. We could put in a second line here to trace this, right? We could do that, and that would work. Here's another thing. Maybe we have this be between 8 and 11. Now this is out of the range. So I'll be really frustrated if this ends up being wrong. So let's run it and see. Yeah, okay, something isn't working. Good, so this is where default comes in. So because I put in that default statement, we're getting that something isn't working. Let's take that out and just see what happens. I'll just comment out this section, run it again. And notice now we don't get anything. Default allows us to see a little result so that when you test it, you can see that something's going wrong. So anyway, I hope this video helps kind of glue some of these different action script concepts together. The idea that we've talked about functions before, but here's a function. A function is just a recipe, a list of commands you want to be executed. Functions receive things, that's what's in the parentheses, and in this case a min number and max number. And in this case it returns something, and because it returns something, we can come up and say, hey, this variable equals this function. If it returns a number, which it does, if we come down here and look at this, notice that it returns a number. We can set a variable to whatever the function returns. It's very cool. And then the other thing that we have here is, of course, our event listeners and the handle click. I'm going to set this back between 1 and 6. We're using a random range. We're using this condition called a switch that walks us through the different cases. And think about it this way. If you knew you were going to receive certain cases, using switch would be a good condition. If you were receiving a range, if it was going to be between 1 and 4, that would be a good case for using if instead. If my rand is between 1 and 4, then do this. Else if my rand is between 5 and 7, do this. So in this case we're using a switch condition instead, and of course we've fiddled around with what a variable is. You should now kind of have a good idea of a variable. Variable is just a number or a string that can be changed. So we can come in here and we can change this based on different things that we're doing in ActionScript. In this case, we're updating my random with a random generator. In this case, we're not randomly changing the number, and right here we're decrementing it. We started with 100 and now it's going down one at a time. We also have a timer variable, and the timer variable has these three parts again. It executes, we declare it. Again, wherever you want a variable, you first have to declare it. So you should always see a var statement. And then we have an event listener for a timer, and it's waiting around for a timer event of the kind timer. And then we start that, and because it has 100 steps, it's going to count off a second, and it's going to do this 100 times, and each time it does it, it's going to go to handle timer, which is right here, and that's going to walk through this text and decrement my num. So it's updating a text box and then decrementing it. Again, I'll just run this real quick. And if we wanted it to speed up, we didn't want to wait a whole second. If we come in here and lower this to 100, watch, it'll fly through that fairly quickly. We could even have this cruise through very quickly now. There you go. So we see that there's different kinds of variables. The variables have to be typed, and then you declare them, and then you use them, and depending on the kind of variable, you might have different things that you can do with them. So for instance, a timer variable has more functionality to it than a number variable. A number variable can just be a number. A timer variable, you have to start it, you have to add event listeners, etc. Remember, if you type a variable incorrectly, you'll get an error. So if we say, hey, this is going to be a number, and then we try to change it, Flash will say, hey, you're trying to be coercive. We know that coercive is bad, right? We're trying to coerce a variable from one kind to another kind, and that's bad in terms of Flash's understanding. Oh, by the way, I wanted to show you a cool thing. If you wanted to append a string, that's sometimes necessary. So notice that it says, the first line there. I'm going to type in the name of the string again, or the name of the variable, and then I'm going to type in plus equals go, and let's trace it one more time. So it's going to report it after this first stage and then after this second stage. There we go. So that's what variables are. Variables are things, containers that can change. So notice when I put in that plus equals, I appended the first part with this new part to it. So you could append a string variable with all kinds of different stuff. I've done that to add up all kinds of different text input fields so that I have one variable full of text input fields. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this demo on variables. Let me know if you have questions.